Let's talk now about hardness, knife steel hardness when buying knives. And that's what a lot of us put our effort into. The thinking is, and rightfully so, that a harder knife steel is a better knife because the harder, stronger knife, when sharpened, the edge should last longer. And that pretty much is the truth of it, but it depends. What hardness knife is best for you? I've tried to buy them all in order that I could figure that out. And I have many knives, Japanese knives and Japanese steels. I have some other German, and I have some Austrian and whatever, mixed and matched. But I don't have a lot of American knives and American steels. And part of that is due to there's a movement in American steels that the steels are cookbook. The steels are invented by smart guys who have studied it and are inventing in a laboratory these steels first theoretically, and then they're putting them to practical use. And those are I'll call them the powdered steels. And picture it this way: the powdered steels are essentially a guy that has a cup, he figured it out, and he's measuring the elements and pouring it into this cup of powdered metals, and then they're melting that, mixing it up, and then they're creating ingots, and from there they're creating knives. Those compare to knives that are sold in big blocks and then cut, that are manufactured by big companies in big batches, the older, more traditional steels as compared. That's not what I'm trying to make. One is a new technology steel that has been invented. The other are older recipes that have been around for a long time. They're different. How are they different? Well, they're different in how they're made. They're different in their makeup, their ingredients. The newer steels were theoretically produced to improve on the natural tendencies of the older steel, to make them more wear resistant, more stainless, more corrosion resistant, more tough, harder. See, the steels come with a certain hardness inherent in the raw steel. And then the knife maker takes that steel and he shapes it into his knife, and then he hardens it in a heating and tempering method. And the steel that he bought or he created in a powder, it has a range of hardness that it can be achieved by the tempering steps. And some steels are hardened by one manufacturer to make it harder than the same steel may have been made into a knife and hardened and tempered by another manufacturer. All this stuff gets printed in their specs, and we look at it and try to figure out what's best and what's better. All I can tell you is my problem is I have too many knives, so I don't ever have to use any one knife long enough that I can actually wear the edge down to say that I wore it out. When I was fishing a lot, I used to have 3 sharp knives on the boat, and in a day of fishing or 2 days of fishing, I would go through all 3 of those knives. That one would cut fish until it didn't cut well, and then the next and the next. I don't run into this in the kitchen because I can grab another knife. That's a good thing and it's a bad thing. But the truth is that for my application, a home cook that doesn't use any knife long enough to really put a hurting on it, a store-bought $30 Farberware knife is fine for me. I bought all these knives because I wanted the experience of owning a fine knife, and the journey took off. And when I started sharpening with Wicked Edge, then I started making a study of it, and that's where I am. And the point that I'm trying to make is, if we're going to buy a knife, see, we got different kinds of sharpeners here. We got guys that are buying a Wicked Edge because they have one or two nice knives and they want the best sharpener to sharpen that nice knives. Others of us bought the Wicked Edge to just sharpen knives, and we're sharpening everything. I'm in between. I'm sharpening everything that I can because I want to learn the particulars of the practicality, the experience sharpening that particular steel. But I sharpen knives in so many different ways that's where I am, that I've made a study of it, and that's what I'm trying to share with you. For hardness, if you're going to be that guy that's a home cook that bought the Wicked Edge because it's the Cadillac of sharpeners, and now you want to buy your Cadillac knife, buy the best, hardest knife you can. But the truth is that unless you're somebody that uses a knife professionally, that you're working hours and hours with that knife, you spend $500 on a HAP 40 knife, and I don't think that you'd ever wear it out. That said, you would have to use it for a very long time, night after night after night. If you're prepping a couple meals each night, you're not using a knife like to cut 100 pounds of potatoes, or to cut 50 pounds of onions, or to make a mirepoix for some stew that's going to feed 100 people. Those people who are professionals that are using knives to break down food, they use a knife long enough to wear it down, to understand, to need that super steel. I don't, but I can afford to experience it in my journey to learn how to sharpen the different steels. For me, I'm about sharpening knives. I enjoy sharpening knives. So the harder steels, they avoid sharpening because they're so hard they don't wear out. The challenges of sharpening them are fun when you do it, but you don't get to do it often because you don't use them long enough to wear them out. Like I said, I have so many of them that I could go without sharpening a knife for years because I can just switch from one to the other. I have the variety to learn how to sharpen a variety of steels and to experiment with each one when I'm cutting and I'm using them. For most people, if you're looking to sharpen knives, and I like to sharpen knives, I like to learn by the practice of sharpening knives. The super hard knives are nice to learn, but you can't sharpen them enough. So if you are the basic user, something around a 58 to 60 knife, they're less brittle, they're a little softer, the edges roll, but they come back, they sharpen easy. They are acute enough and sharp enough for most applications, and they're fun to sharpen because they wear enough that we have something to sharpen. You start using ZDP 189 and SV90 and MagnaCut and all these super heavy steels, super hard, durable steels. They're challenging to sharpen them, and you sharpen them, and then you probably can't use it enough unless you actually challenge yourself to use it. In other words, you use it for a box cut, trying to wear it so you can get an assessment of how durable it is, because you're trying to compare it to your other knives. You just spent $100 extra for that Spyderco in that Maximet steel, whereas you could have gotten it in the S30. I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers. S30 for $100 less, the same knife. And now that's a pretty tough steel too. Let's just say some stainless steel 1910. I'm just, again, throwing out numbers. You know what I'm saying? When you buy in a Maximet that's a 64 hardness steel and you're comparing it with something that's a 56, there's a difference, and you want to experience that difference. You want to say, wow, this knife is sharp, and this knife keeps cutting and cutting and cutting. That's what we want when we buy that ZDP 189 chef knife. We want something that is like a laser and lasts and lasts and lasts. That's great, and it's fun to sharpen, but if they last and last and last, what are you going to sharpen? I would rather use a knife that's not so hard and doesn't require that amount of care. Something that wears a little more so I can feel the difference between the sharpness and the dullness, so I can learn what these feel like when I'm sharpening knives to make a comparison, because sharpening sharp knives doesn't teach me anything. I want to sharpen knives that need to be sharpened, that show that wear, to bring them back. So because I have so many knives that I can't use them all, I have a wide variety of knives and steels that allow me to compare the differences. I'm going on, I'm starting to ramble again, but I just want to point out that we're all in this looking for the hardest, the best steels. Sometimes those hard steels, we set them up on a pedestal because they're not practical. We really want something that we can use and feel the wear and sharpen in it. If you're a sharpener, you want to sharpen knives. You want to feel the wear. You want to sharpen the knife and feel it come back. We want to sharpen knives. I want to sharpen knives. I don't want to sharpen knives that will last forever, although I appreciate those hardnesses and I own them in order to make the comparison that I'm trying to share with you here on Knife Talk on Sunday. And we're going to talk about some other things. I'm trying to put these all together, and it's not going to be as easy as I thought, because there's just so much, and I'm trying to, like I said, do it by the seat of my pants. We're going to do one on Damascus steel. I'm going to see if I can squeeze in one more today.